Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us for this afternoon's talk in relation to public land leasing. One of the series of lectures that's been launched by the Housing Agency, the Land Development Agency, and the Geary Institute for Public Policy in UCD. So we have an audience, a physical audience here today. We also have a significant number of people joining by Zoom, who will be tuning in to listen to two speakers. We have an international speaker, Sami Haapanen, who's the head of service for land development and plots with Helsinki City Council. And we also then have an Irish respondent, that's Tom O'Donnell, who's in the here. So just a little bit about Sami. Sami has been head of service and land development with and plots with Helsinki City Council. He's worked with the council for about 15 years. His background is a lawyer. But he's been involved in land development for a period of time, and in particular since 2015 he has been the service for land development council. The main role of that service with the council is to manage and development of city-owned land, and that can involve the allocation of land plots and our land leasing and land sale, and also the city's land policy as well. I'll also talk about Tom. Tom is an architect by training, and he's founding director of the Self-Organized Architecture, which is an action research think tank, which was founded to promote cooperation and collaborative approach to housing in Ireland. During the period 2020 to 2021, he co-authored a publication called Road Mapping a Viable Community Housing Sector in Ireland, which was a result of 12 months of a lot of stakeholder interaction and to kind of identify difficulties and and ultimately to make recommendations for community-led housing for Ireland. As I said, he's an architect by training, and he spends a time between Germany and Ireland. So I'll hand over now to Sami, and Sami is going to take us through his presentation.
Thank you very much. Very nice to be here to talk about a little bit about the land market and land leasing principles in Helsinki. Tara, are you showing the sharing the presentation?
Is it seen?
With Zoom, but I'll try and here.
Yeah,
are we going?
That's
Are
fine.
we going strong? Yes, I think you can see it. So thank you for the introduction. And my name is Sami Haapanen, and I'm here to tell you a few things about the land market and land lease principles in Helsinki. The content of my presentation, I'm going to tell a few things about Helsinki in general, then a few words about Helsinki as a landowner, about the land market in Helsinki, and then I'll go a bit more specific with the questions of land policy guidelines and principles of land leasing. So as many of you, if not all, know, Helsinki is the capital of Finland. We're located in the southern part of Finland by the coast of Gulf of Finland. We have the population of about 660,000 people, but as a region, we have about 1.5 million persons living here, which means about a quarter of the whole population is living in the Helsinki region. In Helsinki, we have about 380,000 dwellings, and most of them are in apartment buildings. We have a pretty good mix of the type of occupancy. We have roughly about 45% owner-occupied housing and 45% of different types of rental housing, and the 10% is other types of housing. As maybe many of the capitals in Europe in Europe, we also are battling against rising housing prices and rents, and you can see the index growing from 2010 to 2021. There's also some troubling things going on with the prices. The prices are divided between different regions of Helsinki, and we think that that's maybe telling us something about negative things about segregation, and that is something we're really worried about and focusing on. So we want to develop Helsinki as a whole, and not just few parts of Helsinki. We want equal development of Helsinki. We're happy in Helsinki. We own about 63% of the land areas inside our borders, which is a lot more than typically in Finland in municipalities and cities. This means that about 70% of all annual construction is carried out on plots leased or sold by the city. We prefer land leasing as a method of giving out plots, and that means that we have a pretty substantial amount of land lease agreements to govern. And of course, the land property is also very important for the city, as from a income point of view. The annual income is about 350 to 400 million euros per year. The land market in Helsinki, in general, I can tell that it has been very strong for the past maybe 15 years. There are different reasons for that, but of course the strong regional economy is is a driving force, and also the megatrends like urbanization we have been is making Helsinki interesting for people to live in, and also of course in that way also for the developers and investors. Our market has been very strong, especially for housing and especially for multi-story buildings in the city center and near the new Geary tram line, which you can see here with the dotted green line, and it is being built right now, and it will be finished next year, and it has really generated interest on the areas along the tram line. Also, there has been a lot of demand for offices and hotels for the past 10 years, but must say that it is much more localized than the demand for housing. The current economic situation creates a lot of uncertainty. We are really not sure which way we are going, but it's clear for us now that the boom is over, and we're heading into in a time where things are more uncertain. but I have to emphasize that the market of land plots and land is strongly distributed regionally, and the plot prices vary a lot between different regions inside the city. You can see the scope here from 400 to 2,800 euros per gross floor area, and that is also maybe telling us something about the the segregation aspect, and like I said, we are really concerned, but we want to take action against segregation. Uh, uh, in the past, the city of Helsinki has been very active as in land acquisition, but those times are past, and there are basically no more unzoned land for city to buy, and this means that we have to when we buy land. We have to be doing land acquisition with pinpoint accuracy, because it's more expensive and more harder to get to buy land to develop further. So about a few words about the housing policy and land policy guidelines in Helsinki in general. Uh, in Helsinki, we use plot allocation and land leasing and selling as a tool to implement city strategies and the strategic goals. Uh, our housing policy, for example, it's approved by the City Council. The main topics are, like I said, prevention of segregation, but we have very ambitious goals also for new dwellings. Next year, the goal is 8,000 new dwellings per year, and a sufficient amount of affordable housing is also our goal. There are a lot of other goals too, like carbon neutrality by the year 2030. And on the right, you can see the goal for different types of housing. So 45% is to be unregulated, owner-occupied or rental housing. 30% we call it intermediate housing. It's price control or somehow quality controlled housing, and then 25% state subsidized rental housing. So these general strategic goals are affecting a lot of what we do in land policy and in land leasing and land also selling land. The land policy guidelines are approved by the city board in 2019, and they tell us how to govern the land, the main principles. For example, they enclose guidelines for how the city selects the developers for the plots, so the plot allocation. And the main rule when we are talking about market-driven housing are price competitions, but there are a lot of exceptions also. The social or affordable housing, on that sector, the most of the plots are allocated for city's own housing production, but we also organize annual application procedures for private developers. We have also the guidelines for pricing of the plots, and the main rule is market priced or market valuated plots. if the housing constructed on the plot is state subsidized, so we have a subsidized land lease for those projects. And we also have guidelines which plots to be sold and which plots to be leased. The more, like I said in the beginning, we prefer land leasing, but there are also exceptions in this. So, for example, the most valuable plots are usually sold, and also there is possibility to sell the plot if it promotes redevelopment or infill development of leased plots. Yes, our housing construction numbers, and I won't go into details on this one, but as you can see, the numbers have been going up steadily from maybe from 2015. So let's go a little bit in more detailed in the land leasing principles. Land leasing in Helsinki is usually a three-step process. We have the plot reservation phase, a short-term leasing phase, and the long-term leasing phase. In the plot reservation phase, we select the developer, and we set the key terms for the project in a plot reservation decision made by the city board. And the key terms include about terms, is it going to be market-based housing, affordable housing, is there a requirement for energy efficiency level, or and so on. During this phase, the developer develops the project and designs, makes the necessary designs. And when the developer is ready to move forward with the building permit, we make the short-term lease for applying the building permit. After the permit has the developer has gotten the permit, we start to prepare the long-term lease contract. And at this point, it's very necessary us to control that the project has complied with the key terms set in the plot reservation decision. Our lease term is about 60 years. By law, the minimum is 30 years and the maximum is 100 years. Annual lease is on housing plots is 4% of the estimated market value of the plot, and it's linked to the cost of living index. The market, we have a pretty good idea what the market value in different parts of Helsinki is, but the market value is verified by the impartial appraiser assessment. If the plot is leased for state subsidized housing, the lease is the rent is reduced so that the level required by the law by the state is reached. In the future, we are developing our land leasing procedure so that the yield is going to be 3.5% of the estimated market value if the land lease agreement includes a possibility for a level adjustment of the land lease, which is done in 20 years intervals. The goal is to make sure that the land lease is in the right proportion compared to the true value of the plot for throughout the lease period. There are also extensive standard contract terms and, of course, plot specific terms. I won't go into details about those. I just say that the land lease holder has the priority to renew the plot lease. If the land leaseholder doesn't want to renew the contract, they are obligated to demolish the building and give the plot back to Helsinki. Just a few words about principles of land lease agreement renewal. The main thing is that when the lease term expires and we renew the land lease agreement, usually the lease and rent goes up significantly, and that's why we have adjustment periods for the leases. And just my last slide about a few words about the redevelopment of leased plots or infill development. We have very ambitious goals for redevelopment. About 50% of all new housing is to be done in built areas through redevelopment. And when you're talking about land leasing, you have to realize that the leasee or the lease term holder doesn't have a natural economic incentive or interest to redevelop the plot, because the land value of rezoning goes to the landowner. So it makes redevelopment of leased plots more difficult. And for these reasons, we have principles to make redevelopment more attractive also for the leaseholder. And the principles are, in general, that the city offers to buy the zoned new building right from the leasee for 40% of the market value. And if leasee wants to do this, we change the land lease agreement or modify it, and the plot is divided so that we can lease the new building right to a new developer. The leasee also has the opportunity to sell the new building right to a developer of his choosing. And we also, like I mentioned, are prepared to negotiate about selling the plot instead of leasing if it promotes infill development on that neighborhood or on that plot. So thank you.
Okay.
I hope you heard most of what I said.
We did. Thank you very much, Sami. We heard everything. It was very clear and it was very detailed. We can tell that you were a lawyer in your previous life, all right, by the level of detail and presentation. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Move on to the Irish presentation then from Tom. And Alex, you're going to hopefully, well, it looks good now in the presentation. So you're going to get that on the full presentation screen. That's PDF.
Yes. Yeah. There we go.
Okay.
Sorry, Tom, you'll have to tell me to move your slides.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So thanks very much. That's for a very interesting presentation. For me, the key issues raised in the Irish context are how land leasing can be central to implementing city or state's strategic goals, and how it can be a policy instrument to enable affordable housing. On a more granular level, Sami has raised the importance of contract terms and principles for land lease agreement, and what happens at the end of lease renewal and transition periods. Next slide. So I'd like to reflect on these issues by discussing how land leasing is now central to enabling affordable housing in Europe, where it may not traditionally have been policy. And I'll follow this with a brief discussion of reasons to adopt a public land leasing policy. and potential challenges. So Barcelona has developed a very innovative approach to developing affordable housing using public land leasing, supply rental and cooperative housing under the governance umbrella of a citywide community land trust. In this process, has had 3 phases beginning in 2016. It began with 2 pilot projects, a new build and a renovation project, both were cooperatives. And this was followed by a trial procurement phase, which had feedback central to it. And the final phase was concluded with what's called the ESAL agreement. This was a memorandum of understanding between Barcelona City Council, non-profit and cooperative housing developers, and the Federation of Social Housing Developers. And this is a public-community partnership based on long-term lease of municipal land. This is where 99-year leases on public land are given to develop rental and cooperative housing. There's a low annual fee for projects of about 2,000 to 3,000 a year, and the goal is 1,000 new dwellings on public land in 10 years. It's got a very interested negotiated process for land allocation in the framework of the agreement. So land is allocated according to agreement between the parties rather than by a formal process. And this saves on resources for small organizations like cooperatives. And finally, it's a distributed governance structure. So the end goal is fully fledged community land trust, but the land remains in the city, but the residents and cooperative members and the partners are represented on the board level. So it's cooperatives here are limited equity cooperatives where residents have a grant of use that they're not tenants, and the allocation criteria are income levels and this process has been hallmarked by very high standards in terms of construction and architecture. But overall, the program is aimed at new build and renovation across the city on separate sites. The city is guaranteeing the projects, and that allows for a cheaper finance. And there are 2 state banks backing the program. And the aim is the long term to develop a revolving fund whereby subsidies are recycled, and also rent is a part of the rent is going to supporting new property. In France and Belgium, the community land trust. Next slide. Yeah, so in France and Belgium, community land trust is a mechanism for affordable housing for an owner-occupied tenure. France, the community land trust is called OFS. The OFS model, the main delivery model now in France for affordable homes, following a law change to allow.
Yes, I'm
That's
okay, Tom, you can keep.
you can keep up.
Yeah, so the following a law change to allow heritable building rights, so the separation of the land ownership and what's built on top of it. There's a 50 to 60 year automatically renewed lease, and community land trust typically will allow limited equity development for resident resale formula in the original contract. And this maintains perpetual affordability for new residents. And in Belgium in particular, there's very high levels of resident participation, both in pre and post development stages, and in managing the projects. Next slide, please. In Berlin, land is leased according to a social concept. Berlin has now prioritized land leasing in the state ongoing. So the Berlin State Land Management Agency has made the following statement. I'm not really going to read it, but it says that with the social concept procedure, the state of Berlin is supporting a discounted allocation of state land for the construction and use of projects aimed at the common good. Projects who are selected by the social concept procedure received a discounted land lease 1.8%. Next slide, please. In Zurich, in the 1980s, constitution of the Zurich canton was altered to forbid the sale of public land within the city boundary. And also, it's also being introduced, a regulation being introduced that 1/3 of all rental housing in Zurich should be supplied by not-for-profit providers, many of whom are cooperative. Around 15% of corporate housing is on state-owned land leased from the city at a rate of 1.5. Otherwise, corporate housing generally built on land bought by the cooperative. In London, public land leasing underpins the small sites, small builders program, aimed at activating small sites for affordable homes, including housing, and to diversify the local market across London by enabling smaller builders to take on difficult or small sites or indeed transport to London site. So just to very briefly discuss the reasons to adopt land leasing policy in Ireland. First of all, lower development costs. What we would like to know is what impact will public land leasing policy have on viability and affordability for affordable housing projects. In the road mapping a viable community-led housing sector in Ireland project, we try to map out a project in the land booklet, try to assess what the financial impact would be of leasing land, lower profit margin, and we came to the answer would be probably between 20 and 30% reduction. Now that was a couple of years ago. Now the data probably wasn't all that reliable at the time, so I guess we feel that studies need to test the impact of public land leasing. Sorry, we're on the next slide. In different contexts and in different conditions, both new build and renovation. And one way to do this, to follow the example of Barcelona, is to begin with pilot projects to prove the concept and to enable development of policy in the area. Further question for me is consequences of cost rental with public land leasing. Particularly where the leasehold becomes the basis and guarantee of the agreement over the time frame of the agreement. So rather than relying on legislation, the leasehold becomes the basis for the agreement, and it can provide both parties with flexibility at the end of the agreement. But one thing it would guarantee is perpetual affordability for the project. As an instrument for long-term control, it allows authorities, agencies, an active planning instrument for social or planning objectives. Authority is able to proactively specify what happens and isn't waiting for ideas from external developers. Berlin example shows us that it's been used to prevent speculation on land and support development aimed at the common good. In Helsinki, it's a strategy for continual renovation and renewal, and also a strategy for land value capture on a larger, broader basis. Next slide, please. And just in terms of enabling perpetually affordable housing, with the public land leasing structure, subsidies remain theoretically permanently effective. So there's perpetual affordability both for owner-occupied structure and also for cooperative or rental. In the case of default, the home or the project can revert to the lessors, and as we've seen from Barcelona, this is a guarantee which allows for lower borrowing costs. Barcelona has also shown us that it's possible to have a rationalized site allocation process, quite an efficient process, and it can help to diversify supply, both in terms of the type of housing and the type of developer. It could be a strategy for dispersed or centralized sites, and it's been shown to encourage innovation, and it's a less contentious option than privatizing land in the market. Our discourse, can I Just in terms of challenges, legal issues, heritable rights are not a recognised right here in Ireland. So heritable rights are where the ownership of the land is separated from the buildings that are built on the land. And the question we would have is that lack. I think that would affect the financing of a development. In the road mapping project, we engaged 2 pillar banks to test the idea of an affordable cooperative project with them, and they both said that they would decline to finance a cooperative project. In terms of the Landlord and Tenant Boundary Act, be a challenge potentially for community land trust that's developing houses. The owner of the leasehold able to gain freehold on their particular dwelling with the Act. The local authorities are exempt, but some academics have suggested the policy objectives. Sorry, next slide, please. So, just the policy objectives generating lease revenue, providing affordable housing are incompatible. Is that the case? Where you have maybe a citywide program with a long-term revolving grants and subsidies? That's no question. And then obviously what happens with the land lease period end? I mean, already discussed that issue. So just to conclude very briefly, next slide please. In the road mapping project, stakeholder agreed key recommendation was it should be empowerment by public agencies to adopt policy for sale or allocation by lease public land development on the basis of a competitive procedure according to social value criteria, financial viability. And we also recommended that pilots be initiated to develop policy in the area using public land leasing to establish a community land trust in Ireland. On a more general basis, public land leasing can be central to an integrated long-term strategy for affordable housing and social use. It can enable large-scale urban renewal, a policy for scattered sites, and it can be an enabling framework for affordable housing in of itself. So that's really it. More information in our booklets online at soa.ie on all the case studies featured here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tom. Very interesting and very detailed presentation. I think we still have Sami around. Do we still have Sami, or is he? Oh, there he is. Very good. We have time about 20 minutes or so for questions, and obviously there's a lot of people online as well, so we're going to try and divide them up. But we'll start off with questions from the audience. So maybe take questions from the audience. No. Thanks. So just before you go, if you speak up a little bit, because the speakers are up on this bar here. So.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. So I've maybe a few questions for Sami. What would you see as the main, from your experience, what would you see as the main advantages of leasing in Helsinki? And what is the allocation of lease land between market and non-market housing? And in terms of the intermediate housing, do you discount the cost of that land, or is that a market rate?
Okay, Sami, do you want to come back on those three? There's 3 questions within that.
Yeah, yes, thank you for the question. I'm not sure I got the first question.
What were the main advantages of leasing?
Sorry, please.
What are the main advantages of leasing?
Yeah.
The Helsinki experience.
Well, the main advantage, of course, there are many, but I think first of all, at least in the past, we have um, uh, we have idea that we can control how the city develops in the long run, in the really long run, when we own the land, and we also have a better control what is done in the plots during the lease periods compared to if we sell the plot. Uh, in economic wise, I think the lease is fairly predictable income for the city, and develops predictably in the future also, and that's one of the economic reasons why we prefer selling the land. Um, and There are many reasons. Also, there are political reasons why the city wants to own the land. But these are maybe the main reasons for land owning the land. The control aspect and the possibility to develop a city in the long run, and also the steady income we get from the land lease agreements.
And in terms of allocating between market and non-market, when you're leasing,
Well, this is a question about housing policy, of course. We just um, 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 it's our guideline for land leasing, and I think Helsinki has done a pretty good job. If our goal is to build 8,000 dwellings per year, and 25% of that is affordable rental housing, and 30% of that is other types of affordable or price control or quality control housing. So I think we are trying to do our share, and also this is the main tool for battling against segregation, because all the new project areas, even in the inner city, are the land plots are leased according to this mix, Helsinki mix we call it, for different types of housing.
okay. And the final part was just how intermediate class households or intermediate class housing is treated. Is it treated as favorably as the social housing, or is there any difference between that and the market?
Intermediate housing means, does it mean the intermediate housing? We mean it's I think it's there's no difference between this intermediate housing or state subsidized housing, but in the intermediate housing, there are a lot of different types of housing. So there are little difference. We have Hitas housing. I don't know if somebody has heard about it. It's ownership based housing, which is priced and quality controlled. We are at this moment we are talking about ending the Hitas system. We have also this right to occupancy housing, which is also state subsidized housing. So there are different types of housing in the in the category of intermediate housing.
Okay, thank you. I see we have three in the from the virtual audience, so we might ask for one of those.
Yeah, I might actually try to merge a couple of them together because they do pick up on similar themes.
Okay.
So a number of the questions, they comment on the fact that Helsinki owns 70% of the land in the city.
63.
Oh, sorry, 63. So people were wondering how you got to that point and how the city got there. But I think the same question could probably be posed to Tom, you know, kind of in relation to his case studies. And are the case studies that you looked at, do any of those cities approach a similar point? Or, you know, does land leasing have to only happen successfully in a case where the city owns such a large proportion of the land? Or are there other examples, you know, kind of where it can also function? And then another question for both of you is about the annual leasing costs and whether they are transferred to homeowners and recouped from individual homeowners or from the developer companies.
Sami, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can start. Like I said in the presentation, the city of Helsinki has been very active in land acquisition in the past. So that is the main reason we own as much of the land we do this day. Of course, there has been Queen Christina when we were under the Swedish rule, donated land in the 1400s to Helsinki, but that's not the main reason. The main reason is that we have been very active in land acquisition. Of course, we try to buy as cheap as we can and develop and then sell or lease the land, so we get the land value increase to pay for all the investment needed for new infrastructure, schools, and so on. So that is the and land acquisition it's a slow process, so you have to it takes decades to get to this point. I think Stockholm has a similar amount of land property ownership, and I think even a bit more than Helsinki. So that's quite a good comparison to Helsinki.
The lease payments and who pays them is the individual or company?
The lease, the land lease is in the end, of course, it's paid by the occupant, and of course there are different types of housing. If we are talking about state subsidized housing, it is how the rent of the dwellings is cost based. So that the occupant pays all the costs. And if we're talking about market priced housing or market priced rental housing, the rents of the flats are determined in the market. The supply and demand principle. So the land lease, the developer or the investor who owns the dwellings, it doesn't affect immediately to the rent of the occupant.
Okay. Just on your studies, whether high proportion of state controlled or city controlled land is an issue.
Yeah. As far as I know, both Berlin and Zurich have quite a high land ownership in their own areas. and then Barcelona and London are sort of following behind with this land leasing policy. But even in Berlin, strategy up until quite recently, sort of the mid-10s, was to sell publicly owned land, not to lease it. So there's been a policy change there, significant change, and as I mentioned earlier, that's in Zurich already long-standing policy. Just I guess in terms of cost, I just agree with Sami as far as our studies shown costs borne by the residents.
Michelle Norris has been hoping to ask a question, so I'll let Michelle.
I have a question just about the financing of development on leased land. So you mentioned, Tom, that in your study you had approached the two pillar banks and they had said they wouldn't be willing to finance a community land trust model. But that is, essentially a new cooperative startup organization that would develop the land. So did you ask them, would they be willing to finance, for instance, one of the approved housing bodies? I mean, we have some very large, well-established approved housing bodies. So would it work for that model? Or could the state, the Housing Finance Agency, finance it, for instance? And for Sami, I also wanted to ask in Helsinki, who finances the development on the land? I know you have a state social housing finance agency, but presumably some banks, you also get private finance. And is the lease an impediment to raising private finance?
Tom, do you want to go first on that?
Yeah, so no, we didn't ask about the AHB at the time, but that's something that we're doing now all the time. All of our kind of modeling thinking, we're kind of including AHB as the development partner to reassure private development expertise, to reassure all parties. It's a stable process. And just in terms of the HFA, it's definitely something we've kind of been chasing and trying to work out if we can develop hybrid cost rental approaches where the HFA might come in and
Okay, and Sami, just financing for in Helsinki.
Just to clarify, we're talking about financing of the housing project.
Yes.
Right. So the city is responsible for financing all the streets and the and so on. So that's of course done with the money we get from the land lease and land selling and to taxes. Well, this depends also, but I think if in state subsidized housing production, the financing is done by banks, normal commercial banks, but the state offers interest rate subsidization or cap. So it's a specific type of a loan. And that true if you decide to use that kind of a loan, you get some obligations to make it affordable, and also the cost-based rent for the flats and so on. But in the market price housing, normal banks, investors, of course, are really there's a lot of money in the market, at least before Ukraine happened and so on. So the financing wasn't a problem. So the other question I think was, is the a land lease agreement, does it make it difficult for financing the project, or did I understand it right?
Yeah, that's yeah.
Yeah, if so, I don't think so, because it's so common in Helsinki, and the banks, at least in this region, are really they know our system, and they don't see any risks in it. And I have to say that uh, the city of Helsinki and other municipalities are really thought to be very secure land owners and land leasers. So that's people really prefer, if you have to lease land, lease from the city or from a municipality, because we try to be fair and predictable throughout the land lease period.
Okay, thank you, Sami. Do we have time for one more? We do. And we have, again, there's an advantage for people in being physically here, so we'll let Paul Hogan ask a question.
Thanks very much for the presentations. Can I just ask a question about presumably the city is the planning authority, has responsibility for setting the size of development on the building plot in terms of floor area, height, density, all of that. Is there any conflict between that role and then the role of maybe trying to capture some of the gain through the leasing process? Or does it lead to better consensus? Could be either.
Sami.
That's a difficult question. Of course, the zoning is it's required by law, and land leasing is a different kind of thing that the city does. Of course, we don't see it that way, that we have a conflict in the interests, but there has been time to time, maybe this question has been raised, and this is something we can't escape if we want to own land and lease land and so on. But of course, when an area is zoned, the zoning authorities can't favor the city as a landowner. They have to make sure that the different landowners are treated equally. That is very important in these situations. That's a good question, and like I said, the question has been raised from time to time.
Is there time for one last online question, maybe?
Yeah, we can go for one quick one. I guess there's a question here which points out that we already have some long-term leasing of land from local authorities in Ireland. And if we move to a shorter term process, less than 99 years, who will compensate the developer at the end of the lease for the building on the land? So I don't know, perhaps Tom, that might be a question that you maybe like to.
I think Sami can answer this as well after me, but I think typically have new clauses in the contract from the beginning, so quite transparent what's going to happen, what the options are at the end of the lease contract. Yeah.
Maybe I can comment. The typical lease term in Helsinki is 6 years, and it has proven to be sufficient for all the developers. But I have to say that it's important for the city to be predictable, and that's why we have the option for the leasee to renew the land lease agreement, and that's why we have to be fairly reasonable on our demands when we do the renewal of the land lease agreement. So there hasn't been any problems yet, but I think if we would come to the situation where we say to the developer or investor that owns the building, or that we won't renew your lease agreement, you have to demolish the building. I think our reputation as a land leaser would be gone, and the people wouldn't afterwards. People wouldn't want to buy flats, dwellings on leased land, and so on. So it would be a huge loss for us if we would just say that take your building and go. We can, in my opinion, we can't. Even if our land lease agreement, the terms say that we can do it, can say that you just demolish the building. In real life, I think we can't do it, because it would be a huge loss and hit to our image as a land leaser, and people wouldn't trust city as a land leaser anymore.
Okay, Sami, good answer. With that, I think we're going to bring it to an end. We've run a little bit over time, so thank you very much, in particular, Sami, for joining us from Helsinki.
Thank you.
Thanks for Tom as well for doing the presentation, coming along today, and thanks for everybody for turning up in person and anybody who logged in online. We still have 47 people who are with us online, so thanks everybody. Hopefully this has been beneficial. There's another lecture, and I have the details of that over here, in a couple of weeks' time, which is the subject matter is land cooling and readjustment, and it's the last one in our series before Christmas, as you know. And we an international speaker, Professor Benjamin Davey, and he's a very long title, but he's in the School of Spatial Planning in Technical University of Dortmund. He's also a visiting fellow in the University of Johannesburg. And the Irish respondent in that case for that discussion will be Dervla Lawson, the head of strategic planning and land building. So hopefully that's it.